everybody. So I just wanted to address some of the questions that we didn't get to in the workshop, and I hope you find these helpful. So here's the first question. How can I, as a straight student, assist somebody who's questioning? So that's awesome, great question. So the first thing that you can do if you're trying to assist somebody who's questioning is let them know they don't have to have the answer right now. So a lot of us feel really uncomfortable in this society without a label because this society is made up of labels and we all really want a way to categorize ourselves. That way we can find a community and an identity. But if you don't know what label fits you, that's okay. And it often doesn't really feel okay. So the first thing to do if you're trying to help somebody who's questioning is be like, hey, cool, you're questioning. I know that can feel really uncomfortable. Maybe not personally, but I know that this society wants us to have really solid labels, and it can feel really kind of scary when you don't have one. So cool. Know that you don't have to have the answer right away. Also, it's cool to let them know that, like, if they try out a label or an identity and then they later don't feel like that's really true, that's okay too. Like, if you're like, oh, I'm not really sure if I'm like bisexual or I'm not sure if I'm gay, be like, hey, that's okay. Like, if one feels more comfortable now, like, it's okay to say I'm bisexual. And then if you reevaluate later on and you're like, you know what, actually, I feel more comfortable with the term gay, like I feel that suits me better, then that's okay too. So a lot of people feel like they have to nail down the identity right now and that it has to be the right one. And you can let them know, like, hey, it doesn't have to be one forever. It's not about being like a phase or anything. It's just that you're not sure exactly what suits best. So it's okay if you choose one and later on you decide that something else fits you better. And then just be supportive and ask them questions and check in. So it's really important when you're questioning, a lot of times that can be kind of all you're thinking about. You can just be like, oh my God, what is it? Who am I? What do I identify as? And a lot of those questions then can just be circling around in your head all the time. And what's really important to remember is that you, as the person who's being supportive, can really help out and kind of ask them how they're doing, check in, and that way they won't have to feel like they're one-noted or like they're having to bring it up all the time, because you'll be the one that's bringing it up, and that'll be really, really a big relief and much more comfortable for them. And then say like, hey, I want to ask a question, but if you don't want to talk about it, like, that's totally cool. And then the opportunity's there for them to talk about it, but then they don't have to if they don't want to. So that's my advice on helping someone who's questioning. So another question. I don't know how to handle people who are closeted discriminators. People who say stuff like, oh, my aunt's gay, I'm totally cool with it, after joking or scoffing at a queer couple, for example. Okay, so people who say or do homophobic things, so like somebody who made a joke or a negative comment at a queer couple, but then justify it by saying, oh, I'm not gay because I have a gay aunt and I love my gay aunt. That can be a tough situation because it's really, you're trying to address a homophobic action and then someone's justifying it by saying that they're not homophobic. And I think that the important thing for me, and the way that I've always found is best to handle people like that, is to point out that their actions are different than maybe their motivations are kind of portraying them as, right? So like, if you say, hey, I'm totally cool with queer people, but you've just done a homophobic action, or you've said something that could be construed as homophobic, it's important to point out, like, okay, like, but what you said sounded kind of homophobic to me, or like what you said made me feel uncomfortable because you made fun of that queer couple and that doesn't make me feel safe or comfortable around you. And when you say like, hey, I understand that you have a gay aunt and that you're cool with gay people, and I think that's excellent, but what you just did kind of contradicts what you're saying, that can be really powerful. And what's interesting is a lot of times, if I hear somebody say something homophobic, I don't find out their intentions, right? Because I'm uncomfortable, I feel unsafe, and I might just leave or exit that situation. So pointing out to them that, like, hey, if you are cool with gay people or you're not homophobic, that's great. But what you're saying or you're doing isn't demonstrating that to other people. And if you want other people to know that you're cool with gay people or queer people, then you really got to cut that action out, because otherwise people are going to wrongly assume something about you. And most of us really don't like to be wrongly assumed, right? We want people to accurately know who we are and what we think. So it's important to point out that, like, just because you have a particular intention doesn't mean that that intention comes across when you do a particular action. So it is hard to handle those people, because they feel like sometimes they may say, my intention wasn't to do this, or my intention or my personal beliefs aren't homophobic, so it's okay for me to make this homophobic joke. And what you need to point out is that, like, hey, I think it's awesome if you're not homophobic, that's cool, but I'm going to assume from that one action that you are, and so are other people around you. So you might want to take that into account when you're doing that in the future, because it doesn't make me feel safe. It doesn't make other people feel comfortable. And if you're not homophobic, then why would you want people to assume that about you, right? So that's how I handle that, and you know, hopefully that works.
She's up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky.
Let's try that again. Addressing bias, homophobic, or sexist language within groups, especially at a women's college. So I address things that I find uncomfortable pretty much the same universally, because I think it's the best way to go about having a conversation about it, which is to inquire why people are saying that, or like to point out what it made you feel. So like if somebody says something homophobic, biased, racist, sexist, then just saying like, hey, I don't know if you realize like what you said was kind of, you know, biased towards heterosexual people, or like what you said kind of didn't, you know, felt like it was a little bit, made me kind of uncomfortable, because it felt like you were putting women down, or putting people who express femininity down compared to people who express, you know, masculinity. And if they're like, what? Then you can just point out that the action that they just took, or what they just said, was homophobic or sexist. Important difference, the action that they just did, or the thing they just said, versus the person that they are, right? So it can feel really different to say like, hey, I don't know if you realize this, what you said was kind of sexist, because it really demeaned women and their value in the workplace. I'm sure you didn't mean to do that, or I don't know if you realized that you did that, but that's how I kind of interpreted your comment, and it made me kind of feel uncomfortable. Versus, hey, you're being sexist, or hey, that was a really sexist comment, and you're being super sexist about this particular issue, right? Your being sexist feels like a personal attack, and can make a person really defensive, versus what you said was sexist, and then all they can do is defend that particular action versus like their motivations. So I always stick with addressing the action, right? And when you address the action, then you give them an opportunity to respond. Like, hey, did you know what you just said was really biased? And then if they say, yes, it did, then you can say, oh, okay, well, I'm really uncomfortable with that. That's not very, I don't like that. But all right. And then at least you know that they intentionally did that, and they know that you're not comfortable with it, and then you guys can just agree to disagree, or you can create more of a conversation around it. Or it could go, hey, did you know what you said was really biased? And they could go, oh, I didn't realize that. I guess you could think of it like that, and you could say, yeah, this is what made me feel or think, and then you can have a conversation from there. So I think even at a women's college, it's okay to point out any of that behavior, and maybe particularly there's some silence around it because people assume that they have a common identity or a shared experience, and I think it's important to point out that like a shared identity around being a woman, or a shared experience of being raised as a woman, or even just having at some point this identity of a woman is less sometimes unifying than we might think. And whereas everyone at a women's college recognizes that gender is important, right? Because like you chose that space whether you wanted it to be, because you wanted the majority of people to be women, you wanted the majority of conversation to revolve around women empowerment, feminism. It's important to not assume that everybody's experiences or issues or perspective is the same, even though you're all at a women's college, right? You all have a unified experience of being a women's college student, and that's a shared identity, but not necessarily the experience or the identity of being a woman. So yeah.
If you can't be from the same page, maybe I'm going different. Maybe I'm going different. Maybe I'm out of my mind.
I hope you found this helpful. I know that I can talk forever, but I wanted to give you the option to experience some of the questions that you asked in a video format rather than just reading it. So I hope you found this helpful. And please let me know if you have any further questions. You can email me, or you can email me, you can tweet me, you can Facebook me. If there's any other way to get social media in contact with me, you can go ahead and try that. All my information is down right underneath the video, and yeah, hit me up with more questions. Love to answer them. So thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll chat again soon.